It's a great pleasure to welcome to BBC Radio Scotland Roland and Kurt from Tears for Fears. How are you both?
We are very tired, very jet-lagged, but apart from that, we're very happy to speak to you.
Thank you very much for joining us on the show. We've got together to talk about your great new album, which is called Songs for a Nervous Planet. And it's a great combination of new studio tracks and a live performance captured on your Tipping Point US tour in 2023. It's your first kind of official live album in your career, and you reckon it's been 40 years in the making?
42.
42 years in the making.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yep.
We had to wait till we were good enough to record something. Yeah, I mean, it started off as an idea of a live film. The live film sounded so good, and the band, are definitely at the top of their game right now, which includes us. We feel like we've improved over the years. So the live album seemed like a good move to make, but we didn't just want to release a live album without some new material, because we just end up talking about, obviously, all the older songs. And so we went in the studio, ended up recording 4 new tracks, loved them a lot, so we kind of considered them an EP, and we didn't want to really just consider them bonus tracks. So we put the 4 new tracks first, so that's what you get to listen to first, and then there's 18 bonus live tracks afterwards. So it's sort of an album which is a mixture of the two, a hybrid album.
Kurt, I'm going to disagree with you right early on in the interview, because you said that, the two of you never really regarded Tears for Fears as being a good live band. You've got better over the years. But I remember seeing you very early on. You played Tiffany's in Glasgow.
Wow.
What about this one? The 25th of March, 1983, and the tickets were £3.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years later...
Slightly cheaper than Oasis.
Yeah, you came to the Glasgow, and easier to get as well. Easier to get. And you came to Glasgow Apollo on the 7th of April 1985, when it was up to £5. So, I mean, I don't remember either of those gigs thinking this band aren't very good live. I thought you were a great live band.
Well, that's very kind of you. And I think, if it were just down to the live experience, you'd be absolutely right. Because I look back at scenes from the Big Chair in 1985 when we were playing Massey Hall in Toronto. And yeah, we were fun. We were great live. But the difference is this. That video and also Going to California were actually doctored. We went into the studio and re-sang a lot of it.
Yeah.
And the difference is, it might not mean anything to anyone, but the difference is nowadays is that what you hear in the new film is 99.9% exactly how we played it that night.
Well, I think you sound great, and you sound fantastic on this new record that was recorded in Franklin in Tennessee, and we'll talk about the live tracks in a few moments' time. But let's begin by talking about some of the new songs, because they all reflect what's been happening around you in the last few years.
Yep.
And the song that we're going to play in a minute is the current single, The Girl I Call Home. And this was a song, Roland, that your wife had been kind of nagging you very gently to write a love song for her for quite a number of years, and you finally get round to it.
Well, to be honest with you, she wasn't nagging me. She's actually a massive fan of The Cure. The Cure are her favourite band, and she was just playing me stuff, early Cure actually, and said, well, listen to this guy's lyrics and how they are almost pure love songs. And you've got to hand it to Robert Smith. He's very good at that kind of stuff. Kurt and I were never good at writing simple, straightforward love songs. We had a go during Head Over Heels. The lyrics were very obtuse. But with The Girl That I Call Home, I think that's the closest we've ever got to a direct love song.
And when you wrote it, did you think I've finally achieved it then?
I do, yeah. I mean, I just think it's a great title. And it was one of those, we had the song, and I just, I said a little prayer, to be honest with you. I know whoever the gods are that give us this inspiration, I just said, well, I'm going to go to sleep, and I want to wake up with that title in my mind. And that's exactly what happened.
Let's hear it now then. From the brand new album from Tears for Fears called Songs for a Nervous Planet, this is The Girl That I Call Home. This is Billy Sloan on BBC Radio Scotland. You join me with my special guests Roland and Kurt from Tears for Fears. We're talking about their fantastic new album called Songs for a Nervous Planet. And just to stay on the subject of the newer songs, the 4 new songs that are on the album, Kurt, the Say Goodbye to Mum and Dad was inspired by those heartbreaking TV news reports where elderly people were in hospitals or homes during the whole COVID epidemic, and their families couldn't get close to them. I mean, I remember watching it up here and I've got a few friends who were in that category who just couldn't get near their mothers or fathers. What was it about the song that kind of inspired you to put it down in words? How did it come about?
Exactly as you said.
Yeah. I mean, basically, you just described it.
Yeah.
I mean, there were a lot of images on TV of people, looking through glass at effectively their loved ones dying, and weren't able to touch them or be close to them. So it's a very moving imagery. And then putting into song, well, I think that we've been known to write and record very poignant music over the years. And I think it was one of those images that really stuck with us.
But we made it up tempo.
Yeah. I mean, as we usually do, a lot of our songs could be misconstrued as having very depressing lyrics, or they do have depressing lyrics.
But a damn good whistle.
But a damn good whistle and an up-tempo
whoever that guy
track.
is whistling is damn good.
Yeah.
And we'll get him live.
That would be you.
That would be me. Okay.
But are we going to auto-tune it live too?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of a stock in trade for us, and I'm not sure where it started and whether it was intentional or not, but we tend to couch what are kind of quite meaningful and deeper lyrics with more up-tempo, sort of bouncy, happier backing tracks. Whether it was to make it more palatable or not, we're not sure, but it's just something that comes naturally to us.
And Roland, Emily Said is a song that you wrote, because
Yep.
you were going through a bit of a kind of difficult period.
Yeah.
And your wife kind of snapped you out of it by saying, take the rubbish out and go and cut the grass and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Was that a good one to just get it down on paper and get it into the studio and get it recorded?
Well, you're absolutely right. It was 2018. I was struggling with grief. And what was my girlfriend at the time, she would try and snap me out of it and make me focus on the more mundane things in life, if you know what I mean, like cutting the grass. Not that I've ever done that in my life, but I know what you mean. And so it was a bit of a gag, I used to rhyme, her name is Emily Rath, I used to rhyme it with Sylvia Plath, and Gets in the Bath, and Flies Club Class.
Luckily, none of those lyrics were used.
None of them were used. And so we initially had this sort of the crazy school choir thing that you hear. That was the original verse, but we soon realised once we got in the studio that wasn't a verse at all. That should be like this lovely, catchy middle eight. We should write a new verse, a new bridge, and that's it. And then we refer to, the strawberry skies, and that's really the way that Emily and I live now. We have this incredible view across water, and the sunsets are really strawberry coloured.
I think of the 4 songs, my favourite is the one that we're going to play now. It's called Astronaut. And it started out, during the sessions for Tipping Point, and you kind of put it to the side. You've forgotten what a great song it was until you started working on it again. How did that one come about?
Well, for a start, we had 10 tracks agreed for the Tipping Point. There was a specific theme, a specific narrative, so at some point we couldn't really go outside that box. We had tracks like Astronaut hanging around, but they never at any point seemed the right song to add to the Tipping Point. Once we were past that, we did look at old material sometimes, and Astronaut stood out a mile. It's a beautiful song. It's also what Kurt calls the title track. The cover of the album is an astronaut in a field of sunflowers. It's a song, the usual song about feeling that you don't belong in this world, yes. But it's also about that, when you're a kid and you're asked, well, what do you want to be when you're grown up? And, Kurt wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to be a maths teacher. And there aren't many kids who would say, I want to be an astronaut.
Well, maybe that will change because, Kurt, we're now in an age when, space travel is even more exciting than it's ever been. And just a couple of days ago, we saw the launch of a new rocket from Cape Canaveral, by Elon Musk and his SpaceX organisation. And, when the rocket booster left the rocket itself, it came back down to Earth. I mean, we're in an age where people now can pay to go up into space. If the two of you got the chance, would you love to do it? I would jump at it.
Yeah, I would definitely jump at it, but obviously it's a thing for billionaires. It's not for your average Joe, unfortunately.
It's not for your average multimillionaire.
But there's something obviously inviting about it. there's a wonder about it. And also, I think, which for me, Astronaut, the song itself, does it on a certain level, which is realize how small you are and how when you're so self-involved in your own, problems, issues and everything else, that, there's something bigger than you. And that kind of idea of being outside of it and looking down and realizing you're kind of insignificant can sometimes be eye-opening, I think.
Yeah, also, I mean, no one leaves the planet, looks at the planet, comes back and is the same.
Yeah.
They're always changed. And I love that idea.
Well, yesterday they launched a rocket going to Jupiter. It's going to take 6 years to get there, but they reckon that they're going to get people up on Mars within the next few years. So if they're looking for volunteers, I'll put the two of your names on the list. How about that?
You can put one down.
Okay. Let's hear it now then. From the brand new album Songs for a Nervous Planet, this is Tears for Fears and a great new track called Astronaut. This is Billy Sloan. You join me in conversation with Roland and Kurt from Tears for Fears. And let's now talk about, the live section of your brand new album, because it was recorded on your Tipping Point US tour in 2023, and you were playing some big venues on that tour, because one of them was Madison Square Garden, where you were following in the footsteps of people like Elvis Presley, Marilyn Monroe, and also Michael Jackson. Then you went to the Hollywood Bowl, of course, famous for those 1960s gigs by the Beatles and the Doors and Jimi Hendrix. I mean, what's it like to take your music into places where literally the ghosts are coming out the walls?
It was wonderful. I mean, playing those shows, Madison Square Garden and the Hollywood Bowl, we'd never played either of those before. And wonderful to do so, this far into our career. To be able to sell those places out is quite amazing. Unfortunately, for filming, those places are just not cost effective and a lot more difficult to film at. And our management, had already scouted this venue that we were playing in Franklin, Tennessee, that was carved out of an old stone quarry. So it made for an amazing setting because you could light up all the stone around the audience. So it seemed like a great place to film, and it was far easier to do, technically far easier to do.
Roland, it was called the First Bank Amphitheatre in Franklin, Tennessee. Yep. Was the pressure on you guys on that night just to nail the songs and nail the performances and get it right?
Well, what was interesting is we treated it like any other gig until we got on stage. And unfortunately, those cameras just made us very nervous and just not as relaxed. But the good side of that is the fact that when we listened to the recording, the music was far tighter, and better than the other shows. So even though the other shows felt much better, that one was really good.
We're going to play another track from the live section of the album, and it's Sowing the Seeds of Love, which was more or less the title track of your 1989 album. Just kind of tee that one up for us, because it's a great version of a great song.
Well, yeah, it is a good song, and at the time, it was like the new summer of love. Everything was starting to become a little more hippy-dippy. I was reading a couple of books, like Marxism for Dummies. I don't recommend it necessarily, but it was, we both grew up with Thatcher, and so Sowing the Seeds of Love was like a protest song.
Let's hear it now then. From the brand new album, this is Tears for Fears and Sowing the Seeds of Love. This is Billy Sloan on BBC Radio Scotland. You join me with my special guests Roland and Kurt from Tears for Fears. We're talking about their splendid new album called Songs for a Nervous Planet. And I'm a big fan of live albums, guys. When I started buying records as a teenager, the first two albums I bought were The Who Live at Leeds from 1970 and Free Live from 1971. When you guys started your record collections, were you big fans of live albums as well? What were the first live albums that kind of caught your attention?
Well, the first album, full stop, first album I ever bought was Slade Alive.
It's a brilliant record.
That's the first album I ever bought. And then Live and Dangerous, Thin Lizzy, I loved. So, yeah,
Blue Oyster Cult Live.
Blue Oyster Cult Live, yep. On Your Feet or On Your Knees.
On Your Feet or On Your Knees,
yep.
That's right.
The Peter Frampton live album obviously became huge. There were certain live albums that I did love. I mean, I would definitely put On Your Feet or On Your Knees, Slade Alive, and Live and Dangerous as three of my favourite albums, certainly when I was growing up.
Because remember in Slade Alive they did that brilliant version of Darling Be Home Soon, the John Sebastian song, and Hear Me Calling and In Like a Shot from My Gun. That was a big record for me when I was just kind of starting to go out to gigs and check bands out.
Yeah, I mean, it was because of you. I always, I'm sure everyone else just considered Slade sort of this pop band that were like kind of a rock pop band. And then you realize they play all this stuff live, and they were amazing. And, I was a huge Slade fan and Sweet in those days. I used to love the B-sides of all the Sweet singles.
And Roland, how about you? What were the first few live albums that you added to your collection?
Well, I think the ones that Kurt said, definitely, because we tended to listen to the same albums. It was a lot cheaper than both of us buying them.
You're going to be launching the album. There's also a sort of companion movie that's coming out at the same time. Now, any band with any sense would go and kind of do a couple of warm-up gigs somewhere, but you're taking it straight into Las Vegas with 3 shows in the Fontainebleau Hotel. That's got to be a bit of a leap of faith, is it not?
Well, I think if we were just going in and playing that show, I don't think we'd be too worried.
No.
Even though it's been almost a year. But we are from Monday learning from scratch the 4 new tracks.
Yeah.
So that in itself, that's going to take the first day or 2.
Or at least.
Without a doubt. And then once we've learnt them and we've realised that we can get away with them, then we're going to sew them in to the running order, to the set list that's already there.
And has Vegas been a place that you've played in the past, or is this the first time?
No, we've played Vegas quite a few times before. It's on the normal tour routing, but it's the first time we've done sort of a mini residency there. But it's a different place now than it used to be. Vegas used to be, somewhere you'd go when you were old, much older, and you were just kind of like the graveyard of music.
Yeah.
And now with the Sphere being there, the new stadium there that's been built, I mean, even the amount of decent, really good restaurants that are in Vegas, it's a very different place than it used to be. It's actually very credible now.
The next song I've chosen from the album is a track which Oleta Adams joined you on the original recording. You've done a brilliant version on the live album, Woman in Chains. Just, kind of set that up for us, Roland. How did that one come about?
Well, that's a song, not a very particularly happy song. It's really about how my father was sort of abusing my mother. It was domestic abuse.
Yeah.
And she was for too long, locked into this relationship until when I was 7 years old. One morning, she got me up for school, my brothers up for school, and she said, look, I'm leaving your dad. Do you want to come with me? And at that point, she escaped. But that's what the song is about. I saw her, rightly or wrongly, as a woman in chains.
Well, you've made a great version of a great song. Let's hear it now. From the album The Songs for a Nervous Planet, this is Tears for Fears and Woman in Chains. Billy Sloan on BBC Radio Scotland. You join me with my special guests, Roland and Kurt from Tears for Fears. And the brand new album, is a combination of new tracks and, of course, a stage performance that you recorded in Franklin, Tennessee. And you reckon that over the past few years, your songs have got recognition from many different artists. Of course, I guess it started with Gary Jules way back in 2003 when he did that great version of Mad World, which was the Christmas #1. But were you surprised when people like The Weeknd and David Guetta and Drake came out of the woodwork and began sampling some of their favourite songs, which happened to be your compositions?
Yeah, well, it was a little surprising, but certainly gratifying. I think what the biggest surprise was is they mainly choose tracks from The Hurting to sample. And we're talking about American artists, well, when you mentioned Drake and Kanye. Well, actually, Drake's Canadian, excuse me. But The Hurting was never big in America. So it's sort of people that are students of music, I guess, that album affected them a lot. And so I think that, like I say, the most gratifying part of it is that they're not choosing the obvious songs.
Yeah.
They're choosing more obscure songs from The Hurting.
And I mean, people now regard The Hurting, and I think quite rightly, as being one of the greatest debut albums of all time. So, when The Weeknd decides to sample Pale Shelter, and David Guetta does Change, and Drake does Ideas as Opiates, that's kind of reinforcing that, are they not?
Oh, without question. But, we have our own take on it.
Yeah.
And obviously, but it's a strange experience, The Hurting, because I was thinking about it. And when we first went in to record Mad World with Chris Hughes and Ross Cullum, the experience was just so amazing. And Chris's production was additive. He didn't change the arrangement. He just changed the arrangement to make the different instruments play those same parts. But then, and we were thinking, well, this is perfect. This is too good to be true. When we actually came to recording it, it was a very, very tough experience. But what I would say is by the time we'd finished The Hurting and Mad World was creeping up the charts week by week, we had become professional musicians.
And Kurt, it must be very kind of flattering, when guys of the stature of The Weeknd and David Guetta and Drake come out the woodwork and it turns out they're all mad Tears for Fears fans.
Yeah, I mean, and certainly from musical genres you wouldn't imagine. So again, it's interesting the breadth of audience we've managed to create over the years. And we see it now, changing even now when we play live. The age difference in our audience is very broad. I mean, we have, young kids in the front singing, there was one occasion where there was this 8-year-old girl in the front of the audience singing every lyric to The Tipping Point, which blew me away. We played a festival called Bonnaroo in America, which is primarily, for 18 to 25-year-olds. And we didn't think we'd have much of an audience there, but I was looking at the front sort of 10 rows, which is pretty much all you see when you're playing live, and all these kids were singing all the lyrics to The Hurting. And then you sort of suddenly think to yourself, oh, well, that kind of makes sense because they're the same age that we were when we recorded that record. And so the actual lyrical content and the meaning of the songs, they resonates with them. So it is definitely gratifying that our music has lasted this long and different generations relate to it.
You have an incredible back catalogue of songs from The Hurting in 1983 right up to The Tipping Point in 2022. And I know that you don't make records and write songs particularly to win prizes, but it must have been a big moment for both of you in 2021 when you were given a prestigious Ivor Novello Award for Outstanding Song Collection. Was that a big moment for you both? Because way back in 1981 when you formed the band in Bath, if people would have said that all this was going to happen, you would have laughed them out the room.
Would have, absolutely. Yeah. And if you told me back then when I was 18 years old, 19 years old, that I'd still be doing this age 63, I would have laughed at you then, but we are. And yeah, of course, I mean, that Ivor Novello Award for the two of us was fantastic. It was actually a great fun afternoon as well. It was a crazy acceptance speech and it was just wonderful to be there, seeing these sort of, bands from the 90s and 20s or whatever it's called, 2000s, sort of applauding you and giving you a standing ovation. It's like, well, hang on, what have we done?
The standing ovation was pretty amazing, and they didn't stop for a few minutes. And it was great that we had Charlene from Texas that came and awarded us the award because we've known her for a long time. Yeah. So that was really sweet. Yeah, as Rowan said, it was a fantastic sort of afternoon, and we really appreciated it.
If I put both of you in the spot, you've had an incredible career and it's not over by a long shot. What would be your highlights of what you've achieved over the past 20 or 30 years or whatever?
Well, for me, there's no question about it. It's, when The Tipping Point was released in 2022 and it went in top 5 around the world, to be honest with you, I was shocked. I really was shocked. And so for me, the highlights keep coming. I've never been one to look back too much. I mean, I love it. Obviously, I love Woman in Chains. I love Sowing the Seeds of Love. But the new album Tipping Point and the new songs on this new album, Songs for a Nervous Planet, I'm really chuffed about.
Yeah, I think the highlight is always that we're still doing it and still enjoying it, and the fact that we still have that desire to get better, still have that desire to do meaningful work. That's definitely, the cherry on the cake, as they say. And, as long as that carries on, we'll continue to do it.
So how far are both of you looking ahead? What happens next for Tears for Fears?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, on Monday, I'm looking ahead till Monday because we are literally, the two of us on Thursday are flying to LA. We got the weekend, and then Monday we start rehearsals for the Vegas shows. And be honest with you, I can't wait. I can't wait to put that guitar on and start singing again. So we're looking ahead to that. And we're also working on new material, and that's going to take a while. Or maybe it won't. We'll see.
Well, let's hope we see you both in Scotland very, very soon. I want to congratulate you on making a great record, a combination of brand new songs and a great live performance recorded in Franklin, Tennessee. Once again, the record is called Songs for a Nervous Planet, and let's play out with a great version of one of my favourite Tears for Fears songs. This is the sound of change.